Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Bombcast. This is our second episode.
Hello.
And I'm joined by my two amazing guests. If you'd like to introduce yourselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Indy Bob Bat Luke Pants. You may know me from such amazing shows as Sex and the City Web Edition, 2012. Not really. I have a YouTube channel. You can watch it if you want. It doesn't matter. But it's not as good as like Friends.
All right.
Only on Tuesdays though.
All right.
And I'm Saul. You may know me by such works as Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I was the electronic killing instrument in the end of the movie. I got a lot of money for that role, a lot of signatures. Thank you.
Dude, that was you?
I know, the makeup team did a great job.
Oh, dude. I could tell.
Oh my god.
Making those rotor sounds, we really did a lot on the voice.
Not even a minute in and you two have already derailed.
We're just being goofs.
Oh.
That's what we do.
Congrats.
We're just a team of goofs here.
All right, so anyway, let's get back onto the topic of what we're going to be discussing today. Today, we are going to be talking about the game design and the stuff about licensed games. Now, licensed games can have its whole genre of its own. Can be, like,
Pretty much.
compartmentalized as stuff like shovelware or not, depending on what kind of game it is. And usually kind of consists of some kind of intellectual property that had licensed out to a certain game company so then they can make a game about the intellectual property. This can be ranged from shit things like, I don't know, name a TV show.
Superman the Animated Series.
No, we'll get to that later. But it's like, I don't know, like just House MD, the fucking video game, or just Wheel of Fortune or Jeopardy, the video game.
What's Jimmy Neutron games?
Yeah. A lot of the times these games are considered terrible by a bunch of standards, all because of just how they were made, and they were kind of really made to cash in on the show with a bunch
A lot of licensed games are they're mostly there to just make a quick buck just because they know people are going to recognize the IP that they're advertising, and that can incentivize them to think we don't need to worry about quality as much because we already know advertising's already like halfway complete.
Just do that, put in the bunch of the voices.
Yeah, some games just exist to advertise.
What?
Sometimes games are just exist as like merchandise, like to advertise.
Mm-hmm. So
Yes, examples of games that just exist. Sneak King.
again, we'll get to that when we get to that.
But yeah,
When we get there.
the thing about licensed game is that it's a bit of a double-edged sword by the fact that it is a licensed game. By being licensed, people already know about this franchise. As such, it makes it easier to advertise because more people are going to know about it. The problem is that even though it's good at advertising, when it comes to the games themselves, it actually adds an additional layer of criteria because now you have to make it so not only is this just a good game, you have to make it a good representation of the franchise that it is representing. So you can't just make a standard game and slap it on. It has to be something that makes sense and represents the franchise. Like, you can't have a 3D platformer collectathon of Lord of the Rings. That just doesn't make sense. Like an RPG or an action adventure, that does.
Yeah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and we're going to be talking about some of them that we've all played, some of them only a few of us played, and some of them that only one of us have played. We'll be going through just many different aspects of the design, how they control, and just what we think of them for the most part. And I think we can start. I want to start off with a game that I think that we all played that we were kind of looking forward to. I think that would be the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game, Turtles in Time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one was a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was fun. I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah,
Should we tell them about the whole, like, how it came to be, like how we came to actually play it, or
We can.
So-
I feel like kind of
It's like
important to know what we're talking about.
in preparation for this podcast, we essentially sat down and played a bunch of licensed games, so that we can get a bit more of a feel. It was kind of like a bit of a research day, while also just hanging out. And one of the games we played was Turtles in Time, and just
Yeah.
like, what do you? Okay, as a start, what did you guys all think of this game?
Well, I'm going to preface
I thought it was fun.
everyone listening in. We did this on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 for GameCube, the unlockable Turtles in Time, which is the arcade version, which is different than the SNES version. So we will be discussing it based on the arcade version, not the home port edition.
There's probably a bunch of flashing lights saying "Warning: Please do not watch," unless you've played the arcade game. Who knows? Then again, I don't think you can really spoil an arcade game.
Shredder dies at the end.
What? No, he just falls off. He just falls.
Dude, don't spoil it. Don't spoil how he dies.
Anyway, again, what are your honest opinions, Saw, about this game?
For me, the game was surprising in that it was definitely different than what I expected, in the sense that if you have multiple people playing at once, like if you have 3 people, which is what we did, you can essentially just gang up on literally every enemy, because you can just spam attacks. Even if there's like more enemies than you can just bum rush everything. Like we had multiple boss fights where we just all surrounded the boss and stun locked them for like a good 20 seconds before they even had a chance to do, which was absolutely hilarious, because like, yeah, this is how like it actually would go in a fight like this.
Yeah.
I am the evil Shredder. You
Inaccurate to the Teenage Ninja Turtles lore.
Yeah, but the problem though, I think was that we definitely saw the age, because it was definitely an old school arcade beat 'em up, because I don't know if we just didn't know what we were doing, but we just could not get any of the combos or special moves. Like you could slam guys back and forth, or we could throw them at the screen, but we never figured out how to do it right.
So for the thing is, it's an arcade. Yeah, it's an arcade game, so the only buttons we really knew to do were jump and attack. So maybe I don't know. Maybe that is just how it is, or maybe there's other buttons we just didn't know. The only other button that there is pressing X on the GameCube controller. It just makes it so the turtles just yell, "Let's kick shell!" and then but we didn't figure out until later that that's actually how you insert your quarters to get more lives.
Yeah, but,
so because of that, it's very easy to just like rack up like 99 lives as you play, and just it's hard to like game over on it. And even if you do, you can just drop right back in.
Well, to be very fair though, that's really more of just, it's an arcade way to play an arcade game, so I'm not really gonna fault it for that. But honestly, I think something we can kind of talk about is just, since it is an early arcade game, it does have a bunch of basic bits of design. Just like you just go from left to right, just beating up a bunch of just goons, and then people that time
very much so going to the right.
The same, it's just a caveman with a thing, or just a guy that looks like a caveman with a gun.
Or a ninja with a minigun. That's a goddamn minigun.
Or just using hoverboards there. It has...
Honestly, the hoverboards.
Like,
cool.
It's like it quote-unquote has variety and doesn't at the same time, but I don't think...
Well, it's all beat 'em up, so...
Yeah, again, I was about to go into that. I don't think that really is the problem when it comes to that kind of stuff. I think games like these, like this, or the Simpsons arcade game, for instance, are just meant to be played with friends, and you get the fun and enjoyment from doing that. And it helps if you're a TMNT fan from like the classic TV show, because all the bosses were just villains from that TV show. It also just has like pizza's health while using it. That also has a different kind of pizza for special moves, with just like a bunch of just really fun like special moves when you can use them, and and honest to God, just when you played them, I bet the boys and I can agree with me when I say it's just really fun to play. But
it also accomplishes what I think is important for a licensed game, is visually speaking. Usually graphics are not the most important things for some games, but for like a licensed game, it can be important to try to capture the visual style of whatever you're trying to represent. And I think the arcade game did well, because it's going off an classic 80s cartoon, and it has like that same color palette. It's very bright, it's very poppy, that very cowabunga dude kind of vibe to it. So I would say that's definitely an aspect that it accomplishes, representing the turtles in.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Well, specifically the TV show.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's what the game is actually based on. I don't think it's based on the original comic in black and white.
Comic. Okay. No, we will save that for later because we have a lot to talk about in terms of that. But
we have a new topic on our hands, boys.
But anyway, the visual design of that game, like since it's Turtles in Time,
It's very appealing.
Time periods and just, I feel like even though that's the whole bit of it, I don't feel like the game, besides the bosses, represents the TV show as much. I could be.
I think the counter argument to that would be the fact that it's an arcade game, and that's kind of what makes it so, because arcade games are designed to eat away at your quarters, but they also can't be too long, so they can't exactly include too much content.
Well,
the game was like only a half hour long, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like half an hour long, but it had a bunch of variety in terms of its locales. It does. Also, just
it's just dumb fun. I love it. And then we have
that one level in the future that was just had a bunch of different like traps and stuff, and it only hurt you only the turtles for some reason. And they had a
frozen today.
One of my biggest things that I actually do want to bring up is just the animation bits from when you specifically get hurt, because it just reminds me so much of a cartoon.
Well, it is a cartoon.
I know, it's representing a cartoon, so have cartoonish animations.
Yeah.
And for back then, that's an amazing thing to do.
Yeah.
And honestly, just because it's really terrible at stuff, but just like if we at least kind of knew more of the stuff, it wasn't kind of shown. But then, to be very fair, it probably would have been printed on the arcade machine if we did.
Yeah, they usually do that.
So I honestly have to say that it is a pretty well designed game beat 'em up for the time. There are obviously better beat 'em ups you can play, but
it's good for to kill a half hour with friends.
Yeah, any game, let's be honest, is good when you play with friends.
Oh yeah,
I think
my only complaint with the game, personally, I'm not sure if this was in the arcade version or not, but I would have preferred if the bosses had a health bar, so when we're just bum rushing them, we'd know how well we were doing. Then again, they do flash red when they're close to death, but sometimes it does.
Krang, the longest time during that last hoverboard level was just glowing red constantly for most of the battle. We're like, does this guy die yet? Like,
just explode already.
You mean the Krang? Yeah. This is the future level in the hoverboard, so I think you're fighting the Krang at this point. At least his first fight.
Yeah.
His first fight, because he's constantly glowing red after we were just wailing on him for a while, and we were just thinking, is he going to die anytime? Because he's been glowing red rapidly for like a good 3 minutes.
Honestly, just with that sort of thing, I just think, again, it's part of the times. They do get better as they go, like in terms of beat 'em ups. But it was one of the kind of, I know it's not like the like grandfather, but like it is one of the kind of big ones that kind of opened beat 'em ups into, kind of helped beat 'em ups kind of become part of the map, on the map for that, and it's something that can be not stated enough. That is very appreciative. Now, anything you guys want to add to this, or should we move on?
I think we're kind of good with Turtles in Time.
That's about all I can say with it.
Yeah,
it's a half hour, 40 minutes to kill.
It's basically enough to where there's not too much of an entry curve, but it's also, it's not too complex, but the fact that it's an arcade game kind of makes up for that. So I'd say if you just want to kill an hour, it's a good way to do it.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, then let's move on to our next game that we want to talk about. That would be GoldenEye 007. This game, honest. This game, I know this is just, it's nothing for most people, but to this game, since I never played it before that night, it was very surprising how well the game both holds up and is aged.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, yes. GoldenEye is a game that I first got with the intention of, okay, let's just see how good this is. And it took me a while to get the controls down at first, but then I realized, okay, so this plays exactly like the James Bond games I played on the PS2. So at that point, I was like, oh, okay, just play it the same way. And at that point,
with it.
Simple.
Yeah, and honestly, just it's one of the better 3D FPSs. It does show just with camera controls. Like, we all know that Doom and Crysis and stuff like that was like the innovators for first-person shooters, but I feel like GoldenEye was the one that they just is an example of just what happens when you take it, actually put it in a 3D space, and just kind of run with that.
Which is funny because it also pulls the classic movie game thing of where it'll have levels that were in the movie, but then it'll have levels that have nothing to do with the movie just because they need to pad the game length to actually. Because if they follow the film
variety,
it's only going to be like 6 levels.
Oh yeah,
they're good levels.
Yeah.
Honestly, just one thing and the gunplay and stuff like that is very just. It seems super fun. The aiming, though, like, honestly, just with our multiplayer bits that we ended up playing, while it was super fun, there were some things that I honestly think does seem a bit dated because of how the times work and how the N64 controller was, like, aiming, for instance.
I was gonna add to that. It's. I feel like a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's on the N64 and it's not exactly the best aged controller compared to like stuff like PlayStation 2 or something.
Yeah, since it has only like one stick, the limitations of that, just it's very weird to use the R button just to like actually go into an aiming mode.
Yeah, it's like 3D games are just need double joysticks. That's just like rule of thumb, I feel.
I will say one thing for you guys that I noticed. You didn't really use the auto aim feature that much when we were playing. You two definitely tended to hold R for manual aim when the game actually does have somewhat of a built-in counter to that, in that when you get close enough, your gun will automatically train onto the nearest target in the visual space. And I noticed you guys would stop.
Yeah, see, that's
stop a lot to aim.
That's where you're wrong.
That's the thing.
I use the auto aim myself.
To be fair, that is you are right. I'll give you that, especially considering how like not steady the stick on the N64 is on the N64 controller. So I really should have known better.
With that,
it's really hard to like keep that thing steady.
With that, I kind of want to just go with bits of just talking about talking about just how the mechanics of these games just the more or less the cope and feel, I guess. With like besides aiming being very wonky, well, not wonky, just very archaic. What did you guys kind of think of just the different mechanics, like the guns, the hand chopping?
All right, Indy, you go.
Slappers only, baby. That was the best part.
Go.
I said that was the best part, just slapping dudes. At least in multiplayer. I don't know about in the story. But just to clarify, we've only played multiplayer and the first mission. Just as like a first impressions kind of thing, like get a feel for it. But the first mission was pretty fun. It was a nice way to just kind of like open up the game and like show you essentially what it's all about. Like minimal and like I remember saw it till like preface this before we started the game. Like every level is like fairly short and like because there's no checkpoints, so you're meant to beat it each level in one go. And they're all fairly short as a result. So like it's kind of like the kind of thing you gotta train yourself to do, and like it definitely seems like that kind of game actually. Yeah, because like like the more you run through a level, the better you'll get, no matter how many times you die. And that's kind of like I feel like that's the kind of thing GoldenEye has to offer in terms of story. It's one of those games.
All right.
Just based off like the first mission.
All right. Saw?
GoldenEye, I find someone who grew up playing some James Bond games, the controls felt definitely more natural for me than I'd imagined for you guys. The multiplayer, definitely a highlight, just because with us, I think we all remember we all started with guns, but then we started finding the rocket launchers, and well, the game kind of just whatever complexity of the game had at that point just devolved because it was like grab rocket launcher, just shoot, camp, use the radar, just go after each other with those, and that's how we got most of our kills. That was that was good. Then we did slappers only, which is by and far the best, if not the second best way to play multiplayer, because it's just find your opponent, literally slap them.
It's ridiculous. It's great.
That's what the game says. You're not really chopping or punching them. No, you are slapping. The game just says you are slapping.
Slappers only.
Melee Pierce Brosnan and everyone else is just slapping each other silly instead of just punching each other, so they just faint instead of dying.
I wish I had. I wish I had
Guys, don't talk over each other.
The actual level design itself, I do like the type of style it has where, unlike the future James Bond games, which have checkpoints, the whole purpose of each mission here is you need to do this whole level in one go. And that's fine because you're allowed different difficulty settings for each individual level. And what it does differently that I kind of like is that it doesn't necessarily do so much with enemies or weapons for your difficulty. Rather, each harder difficulty adds an additional objective for each level to where the difficulty comes. Because easy is just, get to this location, free the hostage, do the simple point A to point A thing, point A to point B thing, versus the other missions actually require you to have more intricate knowledge of the levels themselves and to actually get better. Because the nice thing about it being short levels is you can die, respawn, know what you did wrong, and get back to where you failed pretty quickly. And that's what I like about it. It's a lot more of kind of trial and error, but you don't get necessarily punished. It's kind of like the VR missions in Metal Gear Solid where you've messed up, but you can get back to where you messed up pretty quickly.
Yeah. That's an amazing way to put it. It just shows that how, like, even though just like, that does have its faults, it does show just how fun this game can be with, like, how its guns feel really, really well to use. Even though aiming seems a little wonky, it seems like you can kind of get used to it and go through that. The objectives with missions seem to be something that's very just, like, it can be tailored to just your skill level and based on just what you're kind of feeling that. And it kind of feels the mentality of just, you know what, I'm going to play GoldenEye for maybe, like, I got like 15 minutes to kill. I'll play some GoldenEye. And I'll just go through a level real quick. Or if you have a bit more time and you can kind of just go through a bit more with skill, you can kind of just go and do like these extra objectives. And that's something that is very interesting, I find.
Yeah. I do have one complaint about the difficulty settings, though.
All right, shoot.
This is something I found out myself. You technically cannot be so liberative. Whatever level you are doing, you can only go as high a difficulty as all the levels prior. So the only way to get to like the hardest mission difficulty for level 2 is that you have to do the hardest difficulty of level 1. And in order to do level 3 hardest, you have to do level 1 and 2 hardest difficulty. So you can't just pick any level after you beat the game and pick any difficulty. It has to be, you have to lead up to it at that difficulty setting, which is a huge pain because it means you have to beat the whole game on hard if you just want to do like the last level on hard.
It's very weird, but I think it's more or less like a teaching, not like a teaching tool, but more or less of just a handling tool, just to kind of, if you're not comfortable with this game, you can kind of go through the levels a few times to just be able to like learn the layouts, being able to realize, okay, maybe I can use this approach instead of this approach, and then that's how it works.
The greatest teacher failure is.
Yep. Yeah, so I would definitely say GoldenEye is a game where if you want to enjoy yourself, it's a good game to play even now still. The game is well enough designed, has good enough control so you'll like it. And if you want good multiplayer, I won't lie, it lives up to its reputation as a great multiplayer game pretty much every way.
Totally. I agree.
But yeah, I'd say that as a licensed game, it does well, conveys the story, is a good game. So yeah, it's definitely a mold breaker in that regard.
Indy Bob, your thoughts?
Yeah, I have to agree. The multiplayer definitely lives up. story, I really like the idea of like different difficulties or like or like missions having like different difficulties and like different formats. I think that kind of thing is really cool, and I'd love to see that more. I mean, it probably, for all I know, it probably does in like modern games that I just don't know. Like that, I'd really like to see more of that these days because like you hardly get to see stuff like that anymore. Like just different like different laid out like a stealth game or something. Like you'll have like guards laid out differently, or like you have to do a different objective, or like anything like that kind of spices it up like each and every time you play. That allows you to like push yourself, or like if you just want an easier time or a quick time, you can just have that.
Yeah, that
I think that's really cool.
Helps with just drawing people into this game if they're not really just, you know. You can kind of know like if you want to play this game, I think, based on how you go through the levels.
Yeah. It's you have a lot of open like options open at all types of different players, like beyond just like, oh, you can take less damage or more damage, or you have more enemies or less enemies, stuff like that.
And I think that really
it's like difficulty that they put more thought and depth into.
That, and I really do think that does help the player just kind of just go through and just figure out what kind of strategy is for them. Oh, should you go for this thing or go for that? And it helps kind of just, you know, go through with the speed run. If anyone who likes speed running can go through like that, or if you want to be slow and methodical, you can try to go through like that. You can. If you don't want to use certain guns, you don't have to. If you want to just use hand slapping the entire way, you can.
Is that possible?
Method, but I don't think slappers only is how they designed the level. James Bond just going around slapping everyone unconscious.
Someone has to have done it.
Anyway.
Oh, I could see that as being a mod.
Anyway, shall we move on?
Yes, we should move on to probably a more mediocre example.
All right. What do you?
Which I think we should probably move on to the most common of the licensed game category. This was especially more prevalent during the 6th generation with like GameCube, PS2, Xbox. Was that a lot of licensed games in this era were platformers, 3D platformers. And I think one of the more notable ones that we played was the Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights one.
This was just, I think, a random game I think Saw picked up. I think
he picked it up.
Good, but you know,
I saw it at half-price books and thought it's $10. It's one of the more well-known Scooby-Doo games. I'm like, it'd be hilarious.
And kind of as we go through, it's the stereotypical collectathon platformer that we've kind of just know with a bit of Metroidvania into it. And by that I mean you find upgrades and you just go through the game. Like then you return to different areas with said upgrades.
Yeah, this is a case where I would say the game itself, meh, but the representation of its franchise is pretty solid.
Yeah, as with a bunch of these kinds of collectathon platformers, there are the bits of representation, like a lot of the monsters that were there. You can find, I think, an encyclopedia of said monsters, or some of the enemies.
I think the word you're looking for is presentation.
Or, you know, just find the caveman and ice, which we thought was hilarious.
Well, he was in there and we were out here.
Yeah, we just gotta wonder, where is
I think he's the sheriff.
Yeah, well, it does a lot of service to the television show because regardless of gameplay, it does have a lot of mechanics that are reminiscent in that game. The gang basically splits up at the beginning with Scooby and Shaggy being their own group. The gang gets kidnapped to different segments as a story thing. You have the obvious villain at the beginning, and even in terms of gameplay, you have like when Scooby goes to do his run, he does like the wind-up sound, and there's that laugh track that follows you throughout the whole game, which is very reminiscent of Hanna-Barbera's earlier first incarnation. It's got a good representation of the show. In terms of just being a representation. Love or hate the show, the game does a good job of just capturing the atmosphere and the nature that the show actually had.
The problem with this game, though, is just like we were very lost towards the beginning. I think that the game doesn't kind of just you don't really know what you're supposed to be doing, like where you're supposed to be going. Like you think it's like, oh, you have these machines that you're supposed to give Scooby Snacks, which is the stereotypical collectible in this game, and you have to go through and just oh, you have to go in this mansion to maybe find something. It's like, no, you need like 50 upgrades just to even like go through it at all. But instead, you have to go out through the different parts of the grounds and like the city of just to find like different upgrades for you to even continue throughout the game. They do have warp points to minimize backtracking, but it just doesn't have any sort of direction and that sort of thing. Like, you got no idea where it's like, oh, where am I exactly supposed to be going? If I need to be somewhere else to do certain things, if I'm missing something, it just seems very you don't know where you're going. Thought a good chunk of it.
Any thoughts on that, Indy?
Yeah, I'd like to. All right. Well, I like to. Hold on. I like to just counteract that by saying, I mean, it's an exploration game. It's like how do I put this? it's a kind of game where you kind of just gotta explore. Like, you're right. It does kind of drop you in. I'm not sure. I wasn't really paying much attention either. Mostly because I was looking up like the voice actors while we were going through the introduction. But like I feel like it probably does tell you, maybe, and even if it does, it probably doesn't really need to explain that much. There's like in the beginning, there's like a playground where you just collect Scooby Snacks, and like to open certain gates to different levels, you need a certain amount of Scooby Snacks. Like you need like 50 to go into this first area, for example. And then I feel like that's kind of I feel like the point of an exploration game is to just kind of explore, whether or not it drops you in and just like, or it tells you or it tells you what to do, or if it doesn't tell you what to do. The point is that you just kind of explore, and I feel like that's like the whole nature of the game. And if there's something that you can't do yet that you need to come back for, it tells you. But you just kind of have to like, it's a kind of thing where you just kind of like, a lot of games were like that too. Like I know Super Metroid was like that. It didn't really like tell you much in the way of like what to do or where you needed to go. You just kind of like went and discover. You go around, you discover like all these different things, like all these different power-ups, all these different areas, and then like, and you have a whole map system. And when you do take a warp point, it does, in a way, it doesn't tell you it doesn't have like an icon telling you where you are at that very point in time, but it does, like, when you open it up, it tells you on like via the cursor, like that's pretty much how much you need to go off of. Like the cursor is that starts you off, and that's where you are residing currently. And because there's no like rotating camera, you don't have to worry about like being sidetracked as to where like, if I go like which way was the entrance to the mansion that I came in, or like was it left or right, and like you don't have to worry, because it's like that. I actually think that's pretty cool. The fact that it's like basically like a 2.5D kind of side scroller type game in a way, and the camera's fixed, so you're pretty much on a 2D plane, but you can also like move around still. It's mostly you're dealing with like direction wise left and right, so like you don't have to worry about being turned around because you don't have control over the camera, and that's like one of the few times that you like, because normally in a 3D game you want control of the camera, but because of the way it's designed to be like a map type of game where you just kind of discover different areas left and right, up or down, depends. It's nice that you don't have to like disorient yourself based on where you want, like where you were, where you need to go, and that especially helps when with a game with a map as big as that and areas as big as they are.
Andy Bob, I would agree
that makes
with you
sense
entirely if it wasn't for the simple fact that in order to progress at all, you needed to talk to a random guy and get a shovel from him in order to even progress. That's a big problem. Let me finish. And a good Metroidvania like is supposed to quote unquote lead you in some ways. It has a bit of a system where you have a bunch of places to explore, but there is an obvious path that you are supposed to go through. It is shown through Super Metroid, where with different colored doors that you can go through with, blue doors. Oh, it's stuff maybe you can go through. It has a bit of different sub areas and stuff. While having, there's all these green doors where, I can't use that. Oh, it's like, red doors. I can use regular missiles. Oh, I can't use them until I get the super missiles. So maybe that's not the way to go. Maybe it's something to keep an eye out for later. But there's nothing of that sort in this game.
To be fair, we didn't play far enough.
Yeah, no, we did a few levels already. We did a few levels. Yeah, we did.
We did a few areas.
No, we did levels. Those were levels.
Well, the whole game's pretty much a level. It's like it's a whole like not open world, but like it's an entire map.
Yeah, an entire
with different
area.
parts.
It's just like, again, like I don't think that, like I think there was effort put into this game, and that's something that is something to be said. But it's just, I don't know, there are just bits and pieces where
I feel like more time with it would be needed.
Or yeah, I think it could have just been a bit better. I mean,
And I can see what you mean with the shovel, but my counter to that is the fact that the whole point, like Indy said, is the game prioritizes exploration, that you're not necessarily told exactly where to go to get this stuff. You're just told, if you want to do this, you need to get this. And if there were like a ton of NPCs scattered about for you to talk to, that might be a problem. Like if this was like Skyrim and you needed to do that and there was an indication that said, talk to this person, yes, that would be a problem. Considering that this is just one groundskeeper that appears in each area, and talking to him helps progress in an exploration game, I wouldn't say that's really an offense, just because talking to him is a part of the exploration and he's just one guy that is constant throughout the world. So I don't see that as a major, to be really being a fault for the game.
Yeah, that's like that. I agree, because like in like Castlevania 2, for example. Sorry, it's sidetrack, but like you have like a bunch of townspeople. They like, even if it was just like one townspeople, and not a lot of the stuff they say is that useful, at least not all the time. But like just having a bunch of like NPCs there, whether or not they say something useful, it's still kind of like, especially with a game like that's time based on getting the true ending, it's kind of like it's not really necessary to like the overall like goal of the game or like the exploration value. So like the fact that like I agree, like one groundskeeper and he's pretty much there like as soon as you start the game, like he's in vision, because like he's like pretty much in front of the manor when you start, so it's impossible to miss him. So like it's like he's like, and he's moving, or he's a living, breathing human. He's like your biggest lead as to where to go and what to do. Every other gate is like out of the way. The only like real like entry point is the manor, and the only thing that's closer to you than the manor itself is the guy. So like obviously he'd be like your first priority. It's like, oh, maybe I should talk to this guy. Maybe he'll do something cool.
No,
Give me something good.
I honestly think that the first priority of most people is to explore through the world, kind of go through that. I think because the first priority I think we most thought of was just starting to collecting Scooby snacks, kind of going through the game, and then going immediately into the manor without thinking to talk to this guy. Like I think what you guys would see, it's like, oh, what's more cooler to see, that a random guy over there or a really cool looking machine over there. Oh, it says I need 50 Scooby snacks. I gotta go around and find Scooby snacks. Go inside the manor. Oh, you can't really progress. It's like, okay, and because of that, you kind of disorient yourself in that sort of bit.
You're just going
around trying to figure out what to do. Oh, maybe go through Toria. Maybe there's something there. Oh no, just a random guy talking nonsense. I wouldn't think it'd be the first thing for somebody to think about. I honestly do think
there's a lot of first things a lot of people can do in a game. And when you're given free reign, it's kind of like I think either way, whatever you do first, it is your fault. Whether it's what you did first or what you did last.
Oh, I just think that
makes sense.
It could have been at least pointed out a little better. I don't know. Maybe I just think that is something that can be at fault there.
I mean, if you're gonna put that at fault, you're gonna have to like fault other Metroidvania games like Super Metroid and like Symphony of the Night, because it does a lot of stuff like that where in the game you want to go down this one passageway, you open the door, you go a bit and there's nothing there. You don't know what to do anymore, and you have to like come back later.
No, that's
and then
not. I'm not faulting it for that. I just think it's you have to talk to the guy
Zelda's
in
like
order
that.
to do that. If you search around and find a thing just randomly in the area, that's completely okay. 100% okay. I'm not faulting you for that. You're misunderstanding me.
I want to ask what the big difference is between.
You have to talk to a random NPC that doesn't seem to be shouldn't be important based on what you would go through a tutorial or any other NPC. It's like any other NPC. It's like they wouldn't think to give a key important item unless they're like labeled or something. Because in Super Metroid Symphony of the Night, like it doesn't need to be done like that because items are scattered around. You just gotta find them. Look and find.
As far as I'm aware, Super Metroid doesn't really have much in the way of NPCs.
Yeah, exactly.
At all.
Wouldn't think. Yeah, the thing is though, I just think it's just you should.
That's a huge difference.
You wouldn't think to go and talk to the NPC because in most things there aren't really that important.
I would still say that it's really not that much of a fault, just because if it was like a very open world, like I said, with multiple NPCs, and you had to find a random one that did it, that'd be bad. But because it's one NPC at the very beginning, and backtracking and teleportation is a very, very swift, very simple thing to do in the game, so I don't see that as a problem because like in Super Metroid, if you've exhausted all other options, the whole point is that if you get to a point where you feel like you've checked everything, you have to go back and re-explore an area and look for stuff that you didn't think of before. I'd say that is very much akin to the same thing where it's in this game, if you've done everything and you've explored it and you still can't get that last thing, you would start going back to areas and doing the stuff that you kind of may have overlooked, pretty much in the same way you would do like in Metroid, which would be talk to the groundskeeper, or in Metroid you shoot at a wall.
Groundskeeper.
Yep, shoot the groundskeeper.
There's no groundskeeper.
Bury him with a shovel.
The groundskeeper is like the Chozo statue instead.
You know, he very well could be. He's always everywhere.
That's not too far from. Might not be too far off base.
In all honesty, besides that, I honestly do think that this game is just a little on the mediocre side. Just it could be better, it could be worse.
I'd say
it's met all around.
I can agree with that.
I don't think we gave it enough time to. At least I don't think we gave it enough time to really give it a fresh opinion. I guess.
We didn't see enough of what the game has to offer. Big opinion adequately. In all honesty, I think you can. I think my philosophy is you can play a game a certain amount of time, and get the feel for the entire thing through that. It's if it can be very in that sense, and I honestly do think that the game we've pretty much experienced what the game more or less had to offer in the first kind of bit, with the tutorial area kind of showing off just the different kinds of hazards, the swinging, the ice physics, that like the tutorial showed off everything that you were supposed to do in that game.
I mean, that's kind of what a tutorial does in some ways.
I mean, it shows off kind of everything with the mechanics and such. The tutorial just shows off the basics, and that's what it's trying to tell you how to play. That's what a tutorial does. But with this tutorial, it showed off all the different mechanics that will be in this game at some point in time.
Mm-hmm.
That is the difference. And I think
concept that the game is rather the game is by no means bad, but if you want like a 3D platformer, it is definitely it is a very middle line mediocre game. There's not too much like outside of that one tractor segment with Shaggy. I think we never died because the game's pretty simple. The platforming's pretty simple. You're really not going to get confused with the game. It's just going to be you're just going to have an okay time with it. Nothing harmful, but nothing harmless. Just straight middle okay.
Oh boy, and I think that is honestly where we can leave off on that one. If there's anything else we can discuss.
Do we want
more time? But that's just me.
I think we can discuss after that a 3D platform of that era that both represents the franchise and is a good 3D platformer in its own respect.
All right.
Oh yeah.
Transition to a game that you all know indie for. Let us discuss Battle for Bikini Bottom.
Keep in mind this: we will also discuss bits of mechanics from Rehydrate, but not as much as from the original. Because
I'll be able to take over for this one. So
all right, I'm just gonna go sit back here and just I'm gonna take a nap. Wake me up when we're done.
Get the popcorn, boys and girls.
Right, Indy, and you begin, and we'll leave off after you're done.
I'm gonna give you 5 minutes.
Okay, so
go.
So if you've been around, so if you've watched my channel for at least like any time, you'll know that Battle for Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom, fun fact, also made by the same guys who made Night of 100 Frights, it is my favorite game of all time, favorite SpongeBob game of all time, and I think it is the quintessential 3D platform. It's basically it's at first glance is just like your own like run of the mill like 3D collectathon. But I feel like it offers like, I don't know, in terms of design and presentation and like just source material and just faithfulness to the source material of the show, like the first 3 seasons of SpongeBob, I think it does a stellar job. Like the platforming is tight, the controls are tight, all the different mechanics are pretty cool. Being able to just like do all these different cool abilities. The music is awesome, like way too awesome. I really like the design, just the designs of a lot of the levels too, like, yeah, and just how seamlessly all the different like play styles come together. Like one minute, like in one area, you'll just be like platforming around, jumping around, collecting stuff, spatulas, socks, shiny objects, what have you. And then another segment you'll just be sliding. It could be for like 5 seconds, or it could just be like a whole area's worth of sliding. Like it could just be like a whole third of the area, or it could just be the area. And then you'll have segments where you'll be Patrick and you'll have like your own throwing, like throw through puzzles, or like you'll have to cross treacherous gaps with Sandy, and just have like a whole entire like Zerg rush of like robots coming at you, and you just gotta survive, stuff like that. It just or just even bungee jumping. And a whole bunch of different stuff to do. And on top of that, you got a really cool and intuitive hub world. Full of life, and all the areas, in fact, just so full of life, and just they just pop with color and just vibrancy, and all the different characters just like milling about, doing their own thing, whether it just be completely random or just completely sensical in context. I don't know, just something about it. It's very much. I'll say this first and foremost. I'm quite biased towards this one in a lot of ways, but like I will stand by some of my a lot of my stances on how this game is just a very like quintessential 3D platformer, and honestly one to start with, because it hits the right beats of a good like a genuinely good and fun 3D collectathon platformer.
All right, I think are you done? You done?
You want me to keep going?
No. Please don't, because we will be here all night if we do. Alright.
Exactly in a video.
Alright, so in all honesty, I can kind of say with with the rose tinted glasses kind of taken off, Battle for Bikini.
All right.
Okay. Oh no. Let me talk.
Go on.
Right, I think Battle for Bikini is a pretty great game for what it sets out to do. The problem is just with the idea of being a basic collectathon platformer. When you've played Super Mario 64 a few times, and by that I mean like Super Mario 64 and games that play like Super Mario 64, you kind of need to figure out what is different about this game to sort of recommend it. While I can say I can totally recommend this game as like a pretty fun collectathon to play through, it's not without its share of problems, in all honesty. And both with this and the rehydrated version, which is a re-released re-released like from the ground up, built prettified version of Battle for Bikini Bottom with different mechanics and the different engines, and some like bonus features. And while I can honestly say it can be a fun game, there are gripes with that I can kind of say. For instance, I kind of just want to get this out of the way right now. Kelp Forest in the original can just be no. Just no. The amount of darkness in that level, in all of it of itself, is just... It's just terrible, man. It's just hard for you to kind of just, navigate through this level without getting lost. And I get that kind of was the point. But at the same time, it's just a pretty garbage level altogether. And it is sort of fixed It is fixed in terms of the lighting issue in Rehydrated, but the level design in and of itself is just, terrible. The physics in all of itself is pretty great, except when you have to use physics-based puzzle.
You know that for sure.
Actually, puzzle. With specifically the Rube Goldberg machine, I have to say.
Rolling ball challenge.
With only having just enough time to be able to finish, being able to try to do it with using these physics. And while that can be a bit of it can be easy for people like IndieBob who've played this game billions of times, for just the new player who tries to go through playing this game, or as a child, I know for a fact, me as a kid, I could barely finish that puzzle. And I know I can just kind of see just that can just be, it's just a bit of a stand on that. There's just other bits and pieces that I think are kind of weird, like SpongeBob when he gets the bowling ball, he does a bit of tippy toe when he's trying to do that, and it kind of messes up my aim. The fact that the hitboxes just with buttons the entire time when trying to throw a watermelon with Patrick, or trying to use again the thing with SpongeBob. And I just need to mention just the dream sequences in general with that level design. Just going from one end to the other just seems like a bit of a hassle. Not that much, not as much as you think, but it can be for anyone who isn't just kind of even there with platformers, but stuff like Squidward's Dream being very, very long and can be very easy to mess up, with the notes being almost impossible when it originally kind of went through the Rehydrated version with a bug to essentially with a bunch of notes being missing in Squidward's Dream. Mr. Krabs' Dream being a gauntlet, and with it being terrible terrible level unless you were able to cheese it in the original. With Rehydrated taking this out with just, being able to fight through. Sand and Mountain, while being very fun in the original, had a bit of a fog problem, and it just ruined the level for me in the Rehydrated version. It is pretty good in the original. Goo Lagoon just being a very long slog, in my honest opinion. But I guess you can say about all the levels. If you say about that, I guess say about all of them. But I don't know why. Maybe just I personally didn't like Goo Lagoon. Who knows? With how it was sort of built. The fact that you can't really switch out with any character that you sort of want. Because I'm not gonna lie, I think if anything, I kind of enjoyed playing as Sandy the most, just because the amount of stuff I can do with her is a lot better than with Patrick or SpongeBob.
But then you complain about Sandy being too OP.
Yeah.
Which she isn't really.
No. If you know what you're
doing,
you can. I didn't. Wait, did I?
Yeah, but there's still some things you can't do as her.
I don't know. I'm just saying I enjoy playing as Sandy the most. That's all I'm saying.
Sure. She's definitely the best slider.
I kind of like characters who do have a glide in that sort of way. And that's also, it's fun because it helped me break through bits of the game. And honestly, I think the original version is pretty ugly. In all honesty, I think the game would have been a lot better if it was cel-shaded. Because it would pop out the cartoony bits of those characters. And that would have shown just how vibrant and colorful it is. And it is fixed in the Rehydrated version, not with cel shading, mind you, but it's a lot more colorful and while just in the original, it's very washed out to me. Also,
that's just kind of how it was.
Played by different people, and I know that you can't get the original Murray Man these days to play him, considering of, things.
Rest in peace, Ernest Borgnine.
Yep. But, they had... back then they could have gotten at least Mr. Krabs, because apparently I don't know why they didn't get him, but apparently they just have this sound alike that doesn't sound like him at all, and they didn't even fix this in the rehydrated version. And one last gripe I do want to mention just before I pass it on is just is the multiplayer in rehydrated. If you go in, I think it's like the theater, you can see a bunch of concept art, and one of them was a robot Squidward boss that you could have fought. And in the multiplayer, you get to fight that boss. Problem is, and you get to play as you get to play as different characters. Some of them you don't get to play in the main game, like Squidward, Robot Plankton, Gary, and that's pretty nice. But at the same time, it's even a dumbed down version of the main game with stuff that you can't really even do. And the Robot Squidward, the entire thing, you don't even get to fight Robot Squidward. It's just an enemy gauntlet the entire time, and it was a very terrible mode that should have been polished a lot more, or just put something else. I don't know. But those are my gripes with the game. But even though I do sound like I hate this game, I really don't. I think this game can be pretty fun at times with different bits and pieces of level design, kind of just shining through, and with bits and pieces fixed and rehydrated, except for jumping physics for some reason. But other than that, I think it can be a pretty terrific game, especially if you're a SpongeBob fan.
Okay, well, those are two very divergent opinions right there.
So you want to be the tiebreaker?
Yep, I'll give my 2 cents on this. So I have not played it for as long as Indy has, but I played it way longer than Bomb has, so I'm kind of the middleman on this little merry-go-round.
Very much so.
Battle for Bikini Bottom is, I'm just going to preface this, I do not like the Super Mario 64 argument at all.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be frank. That's not really a game I find to be held in high regard anymore. Playing through the game, it to me is just not that good. I would honestly say Battle for Bikini Bottom is a better game overall than Mario 64.
Blasphemy.
I think. Yeah. Hang me, crucify me, whatever.
I'm on this.
Blasphemy.
I'm on this for multitude of reasons.
Well, I don't like the argument because saying that putting Mario 64 as like the game that you have to be compared to is a pretty unfair thing, because everyone kind of holds in this regard. And if you keep comparing a game to another game and saying it doesn't do things, or it does do things similar or not similar to this game, and that's what we're going to base it on, that I think is an unfair comparison. And I think it's what a lot of people do for a lot of platforms that aren't Mario. So I don't find that to be a compelling argument for like knocking a game, especially in this regard with Bikini Bottom to Mario 64. But going on that, I find that as a licensed game, I think Battle for Bikini Bottom does a terrific job representing the SpongeBob franchise, because the whole game, for one, incorporates most, not all, but most of the locations and worlds of the original series. So you will have opening levels, Jellyfish Field, you have the downtown area, you have Rock Bottom, Kelp Forest, the Dutchman's Graveyard, and even SpongeBob's Dream, which as far as I can tell was only done like in a couple episodes, if not just one, at least up until that point.
Yeah.
So it's nice to go into that detail. Just give you a lot. The hub area, despite being spatially inconsistent with the show, but that's just the nature of a hub world, just to make it nice. The
show itself is also inconsistent in that regard, but that kind of gives the designers a bit more freedom with designing the world. So you can just make the Krusty Krab all the way over here.
Yeah, so I will say in terms of it has a lot of the same humor, not the same writers, but the humor definitely has that SpongeBob spirit to it. The story is pretty simplistic. It's what you probably expect like a 1-hour SpongeBob special storyline to encompass.
Yeah.
So I'd say in terms of just being and I do agree with the bomb on one thing. The graphics for the original definitely could have benefited from shell shading, because that would probably be more, it would benefit from that. I think that the expressions and the movements of the characters are enough to compensate to where you're not troubled by it. But I do think, visually speaking, if it went like more of the Wind Waker route, it would have been visually more appealing and more in line with the show. But then this also gets us down to the actual level design, which I would say can definitely range. You have the more simplistic design of like Jellyfish Fields. You have, say, Downtown Bikini Bottom, which is a bit of a mixture. Like, I mean, personally, Downtown is one of, if not my favorite levels in the game, just because I like the whole idea of you're just tearing through and reclaiming the city from robots. I don't like that. Yeah, you get some good high-rise platforming with Sandy, who I agree is like the best, if tied with SpongeBob for best, just because SpongeBob gets all these special upgrades of his. Very much is SpongeBob in the sense that a lot of the mechanics do reflect SpongeBob himself. He can use the bubble, and I do agree with some people in that it would be nice to have more bubble-based attacks, like because he's supposed to be super creative with it. But I also understand that it's a game. Unless you're playing Draw to Life, you can't really just make up your own bubble powers. At least not during that generation with that technology, unfortunately. I do like that they do add little references here and there. I do find that to be very compelling in that, like, SpongeBob he's doing with his skis with his tongue. You have the candy machine in front of Rock Bottom. Bubble Buddy is pretty much just wherever. So yeah, I'd find that it does great in just encompassing SpongeBob as a whole, which is something that is a goal for pretty much any licensed video game in general. It's one that a lot of licensed games forget that they have to do. Sometimes you'll have licensed games where they need to have a character do something and they'll act completely out of line with who they are in the show, and that's just like huge narrative dissonance. Where compared to the TV show, you're like, man, this person's not that dumb. They shouldn't be making this mistake. But it does good there. Although in terms of the overall platforming, I do agree with Da Bomb in that there are instances where the game can be a bit unfair. Mainly with the Ball Puzzle / Rube Goldberg machine. That one definitely took me quite a while to get through, just because it didn't feel like at first the rules, I want to say, of the machine were very clear cut. It's definitely possible. I would say like the latter half of the puzzle is harder than the first, just because of timing. That Kelp Forest, like you said, definitely the worst level because it's super dark. The second area of the game of the level is this huge open world segment where you have to travel as Patrick, who has definitely the worst mid-air maneuverability of the game, and you have to maneuver him through all these bouncing platforms over a body of water. And unfortunately, it would be the big problem with that area is that you have to put these tikis on platforms in the middle. And you have to get 3 tikis onto these 3 platforms. Every time you die, the whole area resets. So if you get one onto the platforms and you die, that one resets and you have to go and do it again. And that can be very tedious, especially after you get done with that and go to the inside cave, where you have to activate all these switches that also are not that intuitive to do. Followed by a very difficult slide section where the time trial for it is very trying, especially. I don't know why it just felt harder and rehydrated than the original.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Kelp Forest. I would agree. Kelp Forest is a level I don't look forward to, but I would say every other level of Battle for Bikini Bottom is solid overall, just solid.
What about the dream levels?
I honestly do not see much of what you mean on that. Sorry, Da Bomb. I mean, I understand Mr. Krabs' dream and that it can be difficult as a gauntlet. Mostly just because it throws a ton of enemies at you, and I know you can't really cheese it, but mostly it's more, if you restarted like at a much earlier point, it would be an issue. But the fact that you keep respawning at the platform, it's more of a trial and error. I would say Squidward's Dream. I honestly don't know what you mean by it being too long and tedious. I mean, I understand and rehydrated the bug. That's not really something you can overlook. But in terms of just platforming, I think it's pretty solid. I don't think it's that long. The dream sequence overall, I would say, is a solid level.
Well, I guess that's why I invite people on these things. I need differing opinions, unlike myself.
Yeah, so that overall, I'd say Battle for Bikini Bottom is definitely one of the best licensed games out there. If as long as you're omitting some of the big three that we chose to omit for this.
If you've ever played any like big licensed game, you know what we're talking about.
Yeah. Any additional thoughts from you, Indy?
Well, yeah. So I'll agree with I'll definitely agree with the like unfairness to compare Battle for Bikini Bottom or literally just any game really to Mario 64. I don't think it's a game to be held in that high regard. Especially since personally I don't really like the way 3D Mario games outside of Odyssey control, and I just think Battle for Bikini Bottom controls just much better. Like you can actually control where you want to jump, and you'll just turn around. You can literally just turn around and just be like, no, not making that jump.
I can
actually
disagree with that, but that's just a bit of a thing.
Anyway, I actually it's something I kind of realized sort of recently playing both versions of the game. There's actually I can counter argue with actually a bright side to such hard levels as like Mr. Krabs' Dream, because there will be. I'll also say this for the entire Dream level in general. It is meant to be like it is listed as the last world in the game, so is the entire thing is meant to be like a whole like challenge run, like an endurance run of like some of the hardest the game has to offer, like a really long, skinny, narrow slide in Sandy's Dream, Squidward's long platforming segment, which honestly I dread more than Mr. Krabs, just mostly because I always aim to do it in one try, and honestly it does kind of hurt that the bug in Rehydrated hasn't been fixed yet as of right now, because it only happens when you try to do it in one try, but if you just die and restart at the checkpoint, then it resets like normal. But back to the dream sequence. Yeah, Mr. Krabs' is like whole like horde of robots thing. It actually there is a silver lining to that, and with the fact that there are like clans that you can feed shiny objects to, some of them can be very expensive, and that's not even mentioning Mr. Krabs himself having spatulas that you have to pay like 500 more of each time you get a new spatula from him. Mr. Krabs' Dream is actually if you're not using Sand Mountain as a shiny object farming exploit world, which is pretty much why I love that world. Mr. Krabs' Dream is actually a pretty good way to like be able to force shiny objects if you need it. So dying over and over in that place isn't all that bad, because at least you're gaining something. And then Patrick's Dream is obviously the hardest one. I'll agree with you.
Yeah. Okay, here you go.
Yeah, but
taxing.
But I'll agree with you on like some things about the Kelp Forest. Personally, I don't know if it was just the TV I had at the time, or even the TV I had at the time wasn't even all that great. But it was, but at least I could see. I didn't have a hard time at all seeing in the Kelp Forest, so maybe that's just a personal thing. So I mean, it's different for other people. I understand. I know that was a huge complaint, but personally, I didn't have a problem with it. Kelp Forest, though, I will say, is a very trash level, especially if you're starting out, because that whole I remember it was quite harrowing doing the Stone Tiki Challenge for the first time, and then it taking forever trying to figure out what to do in the Kelp Caves puzzle, and then just fuck right off with the Kelp vines, which I will say I'm actually very surprised to find out that Sod found it harder and Rehydrated, because I honestly feel like it's much better, even though they took out like the huge like jump skip at the beginning, which kind of saddens me, because I always like doing that. It helps a lot with the time challenge. The time challenge itself, even in both versions, isn't really that tight. It's literally just that whole slide, time challenge or not, is just new objective, survive, because that slide is like the hardest slide in the game, because it's so every turn is so damn sharp. And that's actually another thing I can actually credit Rehydrated for, is the physics on sliding. Is that honestly is pretty good, as is the sponge ball in Rehydrated. It just feels so much better to control once you get it down. And but yeah, the Kelpine slide is I can like one shot that now, but that's literally just because of like years of experience and like 20 plus playthroughs of that game. Yeah, the rolling ball challenge is also kind of I can actually bring this back to GoldenEye. In a way, it's also kind of like a trial and error thing. Like each like different step of the challenge requires you to like really try each little tool of each little apparatus of the machine to try it out and see what it does, and then like tweak your timing based on that. And then I will bring it up because it bothers the hell out of me. The freaking excuse, and I mean it in every sense of the word, the excuse of the little moving forward every time you do a sponge ball. Don't even give me that, dude. I think the rolling ball challenge was pretty cool in the way that you kind of like had to just try everything out and like try everything out as you go, just kind of trial and error kind of thing, and just getting it and just doing it until you get it right. I think and honestly, even if you don't like that, here's the number one perfect solution for that. When you remember this, it's a collectible. Literally everything is optional unless up until you get your 75th spatula and are able to beat the game. Anything you do in the game is optional, so you can literally just go for like the easiest stuff. It literally does not matter. You can literally just go to Sand Mountain and just grind shiny objects, or just anywhere and grind shiny objects if you just want to get all the spatulas there until you get enough. You don't even you can just avoid the hardest missions if you don't want to do them. It's that simple. And honestly, I'm glad you have that a collector's line like that allows that kind of freedom. So if you just want to stay away from the kelp forest, for example, you can totally do that. Because every world is like every world is like 8 spatulas worth, and like you only need 75 to beat the game. That's like you can literally just avoid doing like 3 worlds essentially, maybe even 2 at least.
I see what you mean by that. I think what the bomb is referring to is not so much as it being a mandatory thing. It's good that if you want to avoid a mechanic that's not that well designed, it's good that it is. But I think bomb is judging the mechanic on its own as an isolated thing just because it exists. And even if you can avoid it, it is there. And if you want to judge it by its function, it doesn't function that well.
Exactly. Like, speaking as somebody who does, like, not even as somebody who completes games like every time he tries to play them, as an isolated thing, you can skip it, but if it's a mechanic in there, it should be something that should be well polished and fun to play. It shouldn't be you shouldn't look at the Rube Goldberg machine and just be like, I can skip it. This thing's too hard. I don't like it. It's a really boring part of the game. It's like, this machine, I remember doing it. It was a really fun and exhilarating challenge going through it. Instead, it's kind of broken. And
I feel like it is after like the first few tries, once you know what to do. That's what I do with any game, though.
Yeah, but I think that this specifically, it just is a terrible sort of way. It gives me just a terrible sort of like Vietnam flashbacks.
That's just like your own opinion, man.
It is. That's why we have this podcast.
That's why we're doing this. Our opinions formed together as one. Not really, but but the fact that we're all here together on this one podcast talking about what we think about different things. That's the beauty of it all.
Before we move on, I like to talk about, at the very least, the bosses. Just what did you guys more?
I want to talk about the bosses.
This is our most discussed game.
I like the bosses.
Well, it's because I think this is just the one that actually kind of has the most meat on it.
Oh, yeah, the bosses are definitely fun. There's the main boss, like the main robot bosses, and then there's the mini bosses that you can find in certain worlds. I can tell you that Robot SpongeBob / Robot Plankton is my favorite. I never really liked Robot Patrick's fight, though I know how to do it, but like it's one of the ones that always trips me up whenever I'm trying to do like a no damage run. Do and around you go. Great Barrier Reef.
Honestly, I think
man.
More or less Robot SpongeBob is just the worst boss in this game.
Really?
Only just because of the having to use the bubble missile, and the bubble missile is not exactly the most accurate thing in the world. So it's really, at least in the original, it's really hard to sort of use, and you have to go in this one specific little point inside a shaft.
I can actually counter argue that I think the one in the original is actually much better.
I think rehydrated.
I can't give a.
But that's just me. Again, that is just me. That's one.
Is it because it's inverted, the bomb? Can you not do inverted? Is that your problem?
No, not really.
Yes, I am speaking sarcastically.
No, it's
That's
not.
not
That's
the
not
case.
really a problem, dude.
What's the problem?
Just how kind of floaty it kind of seems to me. At least the bubble.
Bubble, it does.
I know
I
it's a
do-
literal bubble, and bubbles are literally floating.
All
So-
about jet propulsion, don't you know?
Anyway, I do think Robot Patrick is probably one of the easier bosses in my opinion.
Wait, what? You think Robot Patrick is easier than? Do you think it's easier than Robot
Except
Sandy?
for like the final phase with the bubble ball, with the bowling ball bit, when you have to actually hit him with the bubble bowling ball. Then again, I never have too much trouble with that boss.
Yeah, you're just lucky.
I will say on my end, I do think Robot Sandy is definitely the easiest. Robot Patrick can be annoying. I do think the SpongeBob fight, the Robo SpongeBob fight, is very. I see what the bomb is saying. If you don't like the cruise missile, it's not that fun. But I think overall it's a solid. I think more interesting than that, though, is how the game treats its final boss. In that, I don't see this very often in many other platformers because usually the boss fights, the final boss, is like an actual boss, whereas in Battle for Bikini Bottom, the final boss is a gauntlet of platforming where you have to use every single of one of the abilities that you've gained throughout the whole game to do it. You have to use the cruise bubble, you have to use the bubble bowl, you basically have to do at least one of every type of challenge the game has thrown at you to that point to get to the very end where you take out Robot Plankton and break all of the pieces. I don't know what exactly it is that are there. I don't know the right word, but I do think
the fuses for the robot
boss is more of the platforming challenge is the boss fight as opposed to Robot SpongeBob itself.
Yeah, and you're also in Robot SpongeBob, so it also still doubles as like the SpongeBob boss in that sense. I will say I really like how it's actually designed in that way. So you have to use like pretty much all your abilities, and it's also like since it is the final area, you're also not given any underwear, no checkpoints. It is the ultimate test. So you have to use everything you've learned up to that point, and pretty much you gotta be on top of your game. Mostly everything is your fault, because like you can just like cruise bubble like one thing, but then you get carelessly bombarded by something that you clearly see, like you see like a robot spawning in, but it's like, oh man, but I'm still gonna go for this cruise bubble. Oh, but I got hit. So it's pretty much you still have yourself to blame because you know this is like the ultimate test. This is like the final, the end all be all like platforming challenge and pretty much the final boss because you're still fighting Robot Plankton in a way, but he just doesn't have a health bar. You're just trying to keep him away. And that whole level is basically just new objective survive and also save the world. But I really like the design, the design aspect of it, like what it implies.
Okay.
Any thoughts by you, Bob, before we finish up?
I think we can finish up on that and move on to the next game in the roster, which
All right.
is the one I think I've been looking forward to talking about. To be very fair, it's probably one of the shorter ones we can talk about, but it is something that we can talk about. Let's move on to
we are not
that superhero game. The one that everyone loves to talk about and to talk when they think of licensed game, they think of this one. That's right, we are talking about Superman 64.
That's right. That's what you mean, right? The Commodore 64?
Quiet.
Absolutely. How did you guess?
What a Navy jam right now.
Where do we even begin with that game?
Well, I wasn't there for when they played this, but
I'm going to start off with one little annoying tidbit. It's one of those games that requires a memory card for the N64. Yeah, you need to have a memory pack in order to save game on it, which is like a handful of N64 games needed that. I mean, I have one, surprisingly enough. I like got one for free one time, and I've just been using that. But even so, it's annoying, especially because it's not a game that really needs a memory pack. The game, as far as I can tell, doesn't need to have as much code for saving as most other N64 games. So that's just an annoyance.
I just want to go through I was the one who played this one, and just oddly enough, like, even though that it has terrible controls, level design is more of just solve my maze and go through cars and fight enemies with your punch. Just
Your punch.
I actually was able to play that game pretty decently. With that, I mean, I actually made it past the first level without any trouble.
Yeah,
I think I only died twice.
Yeah, the game is first of all, the game does not start you off with any generous beginnings. As soon as you boot up the game, it starts you with the rings, which everyone talks about, but it's for a reason because you're flying, but the game doesn't tell you immediately how to fly, and the timer's already started. So immediately you have
it's a tight time limit too.
Yeah, I mean, granted, you get sent back to that point if you lose that challenge, but even so, it's a very unfair beginning to start someone when you start to encounter the real trouble of the game is the controls, because the game it can be simultaneously too stiff and too loose at the same time.
It depends on, like, if you're going straight, you're good, and if you slow down, kind of like a car, reminds me of a car. As long as you just...
That's basically what you can equate it to.
Yeah, but if you go over that speed limit, you can barely turn.
Because the problem is that... One of the big problems is that, for one, the acceleration, the speed that you fly at, is very consistent. You start slow, and then you're flying. As far as I can tell, there's no way to determine how you accelerate, because there will be points where you're just going at a pretty leisure speed. You're like, okay, this is nice. And then for some reason, Superman will fly faster. And his turns will either
as you're holding down the B button, you go faster, but if you let it go, Superman will go to a slow. Again, it's like a car in that sort of way.
Yeah. So, can we have flying cars? We have flying cars at home. Flying cars at home, Superman 64.
Again, if you want to speed up, you gotta keep holding down the button to go faster. But if you want to slow down, you let go of the button and you will start slowing down. You won't immediately stop, but you will slow down. And that is a thing I wanted to at least mention.
Mm-hmm. It also depends on how you turn as well, because turning can also impact your speed ups and slowdowns, because if you bank hard, it can either take you to a standstill or it can make you sweep and actually cause you to increase your speed.
And the quote-unquote like level is a very uninspired sort of just game where, like, besides going through rings, you have to go through the kryptonite fog, which essentially means the game can barely show anything on screen. And just, instead of trying to use this fog, and have to use this fog to hide the fact that, like, you can only see, like, 2 feet in front of you. And the fact of the missions being so just like, the second mission you have to do is save cars. If you immediately do not go and save those cars in the next few seconds, you will immediately fail. And you apparently get more time if you do. Apparently, in the second mission, if you do fail it, you have to go back to doing rings again.
You do,
That's where people decide to put the game down. Because it's very weird in how the game is if you do not, like, at least for that mission, if you do not get the checkpoint, in order to get the checkpoint for that thing, in order to start there, you have to have already thrown one of the cars. Because that's when you get more time, and the game will say, oh, you're actually doing this mission. But if you don't do that, you gotta start back at the beginning.
Yep.
Also, I also like to clarify that
it works when even after that point, because you do 2 cars, you fight some bad guys, and then you have to deal with some tornadoes, which are awful because the game introduces you to your ice breath. Doesn't really tell you how to use the ice breath, and then you have to stop the tornadoes under an invisible time limit, mind you, because unlike the rings where they give you a counter, you are actually being timed to stop these tornadoes, and you will never know how long unless you've played the level enough of times to have it memorized.
And then you have stuff like Lex Luthor's laboratory. I'm assuming it's Lex Luthor's, like, in the virtual world where you just are going through and fighting enemies and finding keys and blowing things up, which is just terrible freaking level design. Like, the only weapon that you have is that
the second level?
quote unquote power is your punch, and you punch very awkwardly.
Yeah. You can also fly into people.
Yeah, the hitbox is very tiny for these kinds of things, and if they're not literally right in front of you, you will miss. It is something that I learned when I fought those 3 gangsters. Also, yeah. Also, it's weird to me that Superman has a health bar just because
They also have
it's
guns.
Superman.
Yeah, Superman can get hurt by guns and bullets. Probably kryptonite bullets, but still, it's ridiculous. He's invincible. He should always be. Maybe the idea is that the kryptonite fog is weakening him.
If there was kryptonite fog, it was weakening him. He would have died immediately the moment he entered that world.
Well, yeah. And if you're playing on an emulator, then the whole background is pink.
Ooh, then it's pink kryptonite, which just
fabulous
turns Superman into a girl.
See, what you don't understand is that he's constantly shifting between both genders, but he's so buff as is. He's like a JoJo. You'll never know if he turned into a girl at that point or not.
Androgynous Superman.
Yeah, Superman.
Yeah, another
hermaphrodite.
The thing too with the game is that this is definitely one of those. I know it's not the only game to do it, and even a game like Doom did it. You cannot actually beat the game unless you are playing on hard mode.
Yeah, because hard mode has all the stages.
Yes, you will be stopped short of the game's final levels if you are not playing on hard mode. You can progress, but apparently playing on anything short of hard mode causes a glitch in the matrix and sends you back to the beginning or some shit. I don't know.
Lex Luthor is just like, no. You're gonna fight. You're gonna go through this encounter. Damn it! I worked so hard on it, and you're only gonna do it on this really hard difficulty. As if making Superman 64 harder.
Yeah, well, especially when you go inside buildings, which is a pain because now it's like you can't really fly as openly. Like when you're doing the rings, you tend to flail around a lot and get lost and have to reposition yourself. But when you're in a building, that's not really the case, and it's so scary because if you try to fly in the buildings, you have this thought of, with the way this game's made, I'm just going to fly through the wall, aren't I? I'm just going to glitch through it, and I have to restart the level.
Sometimes that's how you beat levels faster.
Yeah. The thing about this game, it doesn't seem finished. Like it wasn't finished.
Doesn't seem finished.
I don't understand. Like, why would you release a game in this state? And I'm pretty sure the answer is just time constraints. I think that's
actually a bunch of reasons you can find.
Have you heard about what was going on with the game?
What?
Like the game was initially, you're right, it was unfinished. They were not planning for it, and initially they didn't even want to do the N64 because they thought it was too limited. They actually wanted to go for like more of a PC, PlayStation type of game.
Yeah, it was meant to be a PlayStation 1 title, and which was actually much more.
If you actually go ahead and look at some of their prior stuff, they had a lot done for a PS1 port. They were practically finished. If you look at it, it looks and plays a lot better than the N64.
Can you find the ROM?
You probably can. I mean, I don't know if it's actually finished, but yeah, you could probably, if you just look up gameplay too, because there's definitely footage.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll do that later. I have no clue about this.
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't, honestly. It's like one of the most notorious.
Yeah, they did not want to put the game out the way it was, but due to licensing issues and time constraints, they basically were forced to do it, and they knew that it wasn't ready, but they were forced to.
Based on Superman, the animated series. Man, I wonder if Batman had any better games.
Oh, well, we all know that.
Nah, I don't know. Nah, we'll talk. I have no clue. Well, I guess we'll never know.
The world may never know.
Never know. Never know.
Never know. Does whatever what no one ever knows.
Hi. Do you think Spider-Man ever had any good licensed games?
Nah.
I mean,
none of them were good, obviously.
Like, yes.
Totally. It's something that we should. Maybe we can talk about later, but I don't think I don't think there's anything that good.
Yeah, but yeah,
maybe like one or two good ones.
In terms of a topic we do need to address for Superman 64 is we've already established it's a bad game, but as a representation of the franchise, it is also very bad.
It is.
It's not that great.
Moment you bring it up, it is supposed to be based off Superman the animated series. if not
Yeah.
from the art style, seeing how Lex Luthor looks, it's the fact of they have the same. The only I think is there any voice lines besides the one in the beginning?
There's a couple, I believe.
But it's supposed to be the animated series Superman voice actor.
And it has the same designs too. It was like Brainiac and a lot of the other characters. It's the same animated series designs for the characters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you even fight Brainiac? Because he's like on the.
Yes, you do. I mean, like you don't get like it. I mean, the boss fights are not really. And you can probably take a guess that they're not that good.
Yeah, I think a bunch of them are probably just broken. You know what would have been really cool?
What?
If you were able to use if you had a bunch of Superman's powers like on the get-go, like
On the
maybe it's
get-go?
like, oh, when you get trapped in this virtual world, most Lex Luthor takes away your powers based on that, and you unlock them as you go through, and it's stuff that you can use, and you can just kind of go through a progression of just trying to kind of gain most of your powers back and just go through. Maybe like another DC game that we will talk about later.
True, very true.
Instead of going through rings. I know there was another Superman game that I've heard that I remember hearing about that I remember Saw playing.
Superman Returns.
Yeah, Superman Returns. It's the one with the city as the health bar.
Yeah, Superman Returns. Okay. Are we going to transition to this one?
Yeah, let's transition to this.
Woo!
Kids, we're on the move to Superman transition.
All right, so I'm just going to say with right off the bat, Superman Returns better than Superman 64. I think we can all believe that one.
I've actually seen gameplay.
I mean,
for
any
this game.
Superman game is better than 64.
I've actually seen
can just
gameplay
look
for this
it up
game,
and you
and it's
already
just
know.
like it does have. I know it does have its problems and stuff, but I do like how, I like how finished it is, and just based on just what I've seen, it does seem like a very fun game.
You'd say that Superman surely has returned.
All right, so how this game goes is this. You start a few levels in like this gauntlet arena, just learning the controls, and that's kind of it. But then before you get thrown into the open world, actually the first level is you saving the city from a meteor shower, and then you get caught in like mongrels, like battleship, and then you get to open world. So how it goes is you basically play as Superman, and your objective is to fly around the city, basically stop crimes that are unfolding. Every time you stop a crime that's going on, you'll be shown a result screen and a bar full of experience. And the point is you want to just complete as many missions as you can to fill up the bar. As soon as you do, you are able to progress the story. Which, pretty interesting thing. Kind of like Ultimate Spider-Man, in that you need to fulfill a certain amount of city requirements to progress the plot.
What are you
Be
talking
intriguing.
about? There's no other
Unlike
superhero game.
But anyway, unlike Ultimate Spider-Man, though, the bar doubles as your save feature. Because you can only save game. The game only saves after you complete the bar. So if you are going to sit down to play, you need to fulfill essentially a whole story segment each time you do it. Otherwise, progress is lost. That's definitely a big minus. Because I remember as a kid, I never really understood that was how the game saved. And every time I booted up, I would wonder, why am I still at the same place as before?
I would just finish this level. Going through that, yeah. I just finished it, and I turned off the game to go eat, and I come back, and it's gone.
Yeah. I will commend the game on this, though. The flying is actually it's very loose, but it's actually kind of fun because you can fly at normal speed. But then there's a super speed button.
What?
Yeah, if you fly, here's the thing: if you fly faster than you can run in this game. But if you fly, you will actually get faster and faster and faster as you keep going. Eventually, if you fly for long enough, Superman will break the sound barrier and it'll make the noise. And he'll break more barriers as you let him keep going. Like it'll start off flying, then it'll turn bluish as you break the sound barrier, and as you get faster, it'll actually turn reddish. He'll be fine. Nothing bad will happen to Superman, but you can just keep going. It's actually kind of a fun challenge to go through the city streets and try to how long can I fly at this speed without crashing into a building?
How
Pretty
fast
sure
can you
anybody
go in
who passed
reverse?
by is immediately dead, Superman. But who cares?
You can actually destroy the city if you want to. The game doesn't stop you.
Does it punish you?
The only thing you get punished is that the city's health bar goes, because the whole point is that the game acknowledges that Superman is invincible. It acknowledges by saying Superman doesn't have a health bar. The city has a health bar, in that if the city gets destroyed enough throughout the game, it will count as a game over and you have to restart the missions, because Superman's whole thing is that he values the city almost more than he values himself. And he will not allow destruction to come to it.
So
Otherwise, he will feel he's failed as Superman. So you want to have as little damage happen to the city as possible. And that's
Superman's
what
depression bar, where he's super happy, but as it goes through down, just gets more and more
Not exactly
depressed.
like that.
What?
Kinda, yeah. If you want to think of it that way,
I like that.
It's like, I've let this block of city gets destroyed. I'm just gonna abandon these guys, let them destroy the rest of the city because I'm too depressed after failing only this one street.
I failed the neighborhood watch, not the neighborhood watch.
What street was the?
Not the bowling alley.
Street. Oh, okay.
And even the old bowling alley, not the bowling alley.
Actually, another nice thing about the game, though, is that it actually does have a combat system that is somewhat competent. You actually do get combos and like special moves that Superman can pull off to fight his opponents, and he does get access to like heat vision, super breath, ice breath. And they do have their own meters. It's that they recharge when you use it. It'll take a while to recharge it, and you can use it however much you want, but it does take recharge time before you can use them again after you do use them, which definitely helps. And it gives you the ability. Some enemies are weaker to like your heat vision than your ice breath. Your super breath can be hilarious because at one point you can actually unlock a supercharge where if you're in the air or at the bottom and your bar is completely filled for an ability and you hold down the attack, it'll take a moment to wind up before he goes into this ape shit move where if he's like heat vision, he'll charge up and then he will like laser like this giant beam of death everything in front of him, and he's just like swinging his head back and forth and just destroying everything in front of him.
Superman, you've murdered people.
That's a
No,
lot.
I didn't. They're just sleeping. Superman, you vaporized like 10 of those guys.
Clark, that kills people.
Yeah, so the game is definitely not. It's very unpolished, and you can definitely tell it wasn't finished. But I would say it's okay overall. Superman Returns is an okay game. I mean, you're hard pressed to find a Superman game that you can say is a really good game because Superman's had bad luck.
Yeah.
Well, the
Let's say
fact is,
Superman
like, how do you make an
is-
invincible, immortal super game about like a immortal like guy like Superman fun to play? You either have to go
I
super
do like the
overpowered or
concept of,
take
like-
away a bunch of his powers.
I do like the concept of like the city is your health bar rather than you are your health bar.
I think that's a good way to go about it. Make something else the health bar.
Yeah.
Or like
Interesting.
the health bar, instead of that, it's just his parents' approval. It's the parents' approval bar. The more stupid things you do, the less of approval you get from your parents.
It's a curfew. It's a curfew. It's like be back by 6 or I'm eating all your dinner. No, not dinner. It's how my powers are.
There's no
powered.
dinner. All right,
Anyway.
I think we can move on from the Superman now.
All right, is there any
Yeah.
game that you guys kind of want to talk about anymore?
Bob, anything right off the top of your head you want? Because I don't think you've suggested anything so far.
There are a few games that I would like to talk about. One of them, of course, being the Lord of the Rings games. I
Transition
haven't
to Lord
played.
of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings.
Lord.
Da, 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 da. Just imagine the Fellowship running across Middle Earth. Yeah. So, Lord of the Rings has a pretty handful, decent amount of good games. Some good, some are all right, some meh. But like,
Yeah, try to. What is there any game
I
that
can
you
give you some noteworthy ones. Lord of the Rings 3: Return of the King, the video game. is a very solid hack and slash, and it's single player and co-op, like single player and multiplayer co-op. It was also online at one point on PS2. It's pretty fun. I guess you could say it's fairly short. It's 15 whole levels, 13 if you count only the story-based levels, and it's basically 3 different paths. One is the 3 hunters, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. The other being Gandalf's path, and the other being Sam and Frodo, the Hobbit's path. And it's basically following the entire plot of the movie, leading up to the climactic finale, destroying the ring and all that stuff. It's pretty fun. Everyone has like their own it's got its own like combo system. Everyone has their own different moves. Everyone plays differently. It's some are obviously more OP than others. Gandalf, but even Legolas as well. But it's honestly very fun. It's also pretty fun with friends. Well, at least one friend, because it's only 2-player co-op, because that's how PlayStation 2 works. But I like it. It's pretty fun. It's nice to, and what I like about co-op especially is that you can compete for kills, like who has the most kills. And that's also kind of a fun little, like, I guess in joke, like a fun little Easter egg to the nice little nod to the fact that Legolas and Gimli, their thing was always competing for kills in big battles. So that's another thing I like. But no, it's pretty cool. Some of us are also pretty damn hard.
Absolutely. The spider level.
Oh yeah, spider level is pretty harsh first time through.
Yeah.
And then there's some of the really great levels, like some of the equally hard but just as fun levels, like what's it called? The Southern Gate or Sirathongal. Southern Gate is original to the game, by the way. It's not from the movies or anything, so it takes some liberties in that sense. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's a pretty fun time.
I think so too, that Return of the King is a really solid action game, because thankfully, for one, not that glitchy, which is something to note of licensed games. They tend to be glitchy, so this one is pretty solid in that regard, thankfully. And I do agree that there are just some hard levels, but definitely ones that are memorable, because Southern Gate, I remember just being the place to go to farm, because it's like the most satisfying level well, at least one of them to come back to when you're fully leveled up, because you get ransacked early on when you're not that high level. But if you come back with a bunch of upgrades and you just slaughter this army that's surrounding you like it's nothing, it's pretty cathartic.
Dude, I've gone from level 1. I went to that level as a level 1 Gimli and came out with like a level 7, I think, during my playthrough of it. It was awesome.
It's satisfying.
Yeah,
and the Black Gates, that level.
Oh man, that was pretty rough too, but it's still pretty fun.
It's a good challenge, that one.
Yeah, I give it that. Ministry of the Courtyard can go fuck itself though. I hate that level.
I will agree to that one. That one is second most hated one for me. It's the spiders is the hard one on single player, just because I just keep dying.
I think the Hobbits levels are honestly harder on co-op. Even though you haven't, like, you're given like lives, and you're even given extra lives when you get to the Hobbit section, because they're harder, because you're playing as the Hobbits, so they're naturally they're not going to be as strong as the men or the women or the children too. I wonder if there's any Star Wars games.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
We're gonna leave that alone for now.
Leave it alone.
I will say a nice detail of Return of the King is that it actually does do a good job of representing the characters, because certain upgrades are locked to certain characters based on their skills.
Yeah.
For example, Legolas is the only character in the game that can get level 4 arrows. And that makes...
Yeah, and he can also shoot 2 at a time if you get him to the max level.
If you get him to max level, he's the only one that gets the shiny purple glow arrows that can like insta-kill an orc like in 1 or 2 hits. I mean, like a troll. It can kill a troll super easy that way. Yeah. It makes sense because he's down to be like the expert archer. So him having that makes sense, and it applies to other characters with their skill sets.
Yeah. Gimli has like the more like up close and personal combos. Aragorn is like well-rounded. He's good with archery, and he's also very well versed in swordplay. And like magic is definitely Gandalf's forte. Like his magic attacks will be just the bomb diggity. Very nice area of effect attacks on him. His combos are pretty tight too. Sam and like all the hobbits also have like the ability to like do more damage to enemies from the back, so that's useful on certain levels.
Mm-hmm. And then you wanted to bring up that the RPG as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the RPG. The RPG is also I think it's definitely made around the same time. They're all made around the same time as like the movies, but this one in particular because they reused some assets and models from the Return of the King game. It was made after it. It's called Lord of the Rings: The Third Age, and it's honestly a fairly fun, I guess you could say, kind of Final Fantasy type thing, where it's got like the whole like queue, like it's got like the whole turn order queue thing that you got going on the right side of the screen, and you gotta like plan out your attacks, and like it's honestly pretty fun. You got like what it is basically, it doesn't follow the Fellowship, but it follows like a separate company that's like pretty much fairly closely following the Fellowship, but it's still like undertaking its own story, and you can like level up your guys, and like it's also co-op as well. So like one player controls like this set of characters and the other controls that, and like you like take turns. It's honestly a pretty fun RPG. I know you guys haven't played it. I'm the only one that's actually have played it so far, and I'd love to share that experience with you guys. It's honestly a pretty fun time. It can get pretty annoying and rough at times, but that's with every RPG. But
do you mind if I
honestly, I
tackle
look
for
short
Lord
out
of the
to
Rings game? Because there is one I think we need to mention.
Shadow of
Shadow of
War.
The Shadow of War
Mordor.
games. Yep.
Shadow of Mordor,
The Shadow of Mordor, because
and then Shadow of War.
yeah. Oh, those games.
Go on.
Like who's played them besides me?
I have
not.
haven't played it.
Oh. You have not, so I'm the only one who's played them.
So how would you
Go on.
put them down as licensed games then?
They are considered licensed games.
Yes, which is why we ask, how do you consider them?
Like, it's very, like, this game is it's something that I haven't really seen before in terms of its mechanics. It reminds me of it has a bit of like this Dark Souls sort of thing, but also has this, also just has, like, it's sort of just a prequel sort of thing, you know, like, same time, you know, as the other prequel, with the main character controlling the Ring of Power. And the whole point of him is just building up a big army full of just, like, what was it, orcs? Yeah, a big army of orcs.
Yeah.
With these games to kind of go through, dominate through the Mordor, and just kind of take over bits of things, while you trying to find the killer, essentially trying to kill the people who've killed your family. We must save my family! Just one of the fun bits about it, besides being a bit of an easier Dark Souls, is the revenge system, which is something I haven't ever really seen in another game, where, like, anytime you are essentially an immortal being because of the soul that inhabits you, the elven soul that inhabits you, the other one who made the ring along with Sauron, and because of that, anytime you end up dying, you come back, and because like, oh, we always make the joke of the guy who kills the main character is the guy who gets promoted. In this game, this is something that actually happens. And just, they end up getting promoted and becoming more powerful because of that. And they end up just making fun of you because of it. And end up going down what essentially is your level, in quotes. But that, I mean, just you can't control more powerful beings, more powerful orcs, because they don't really care about you. Like, they can't follow a leader that they don't really like. And with a bunch of these elven powers, and it just makes this game super fun and just what you can kind of go through. Like, I remember there was a bit where I ended up, like, going through fighting all these because, like, any other, like, orc bit is essentially its own little boss fight. With, like, I know they actually have their actual boss fights, but, like, each kind of, like, boss is its own little boss fight. And I remember there was just, like, fighting all through these, all these regular, these really powerful orcs, end up climbing up, being killed by, like, a random ass mook. And because of that, this, like, random mook end up getting a bunch of notoriety and just leveling up like crazy. And it can make the game harder for you. And you can get nemesis that are just, like, kind of known for these sort of things. And it just seems like a very fun game with the mechanics over here. You do get to see a bunch of, like, characters like Shelob and Sauron on the process, because, you know, it's after that. But yeah, I do. It's a pretty well polished game. And I do love how you can kind of go through and do different scenarios, like when you have different keeps where you can either go in guns blazing, or you can try to sneak around and just sneak attack and kill a bunch of people. And it's a pretty fun thing to do. Reminds me of Assassin's Creed in a bit of a way. It takes it does what a bunch of other games do and takes bits from other games by adding its own little spin to it. With just using the Ring of Power, the one ring to rule them all, and just use that as a way of just building up your own army and then taking over different keeps. And then you have a bit more of an influence in the area because of it, and you gotta manage all that kind of stuff. And that's the kind of stuff I live for.
That's a praising review right there.
I always say if your game is amazing, I will sing your praises from the mountaintops.
It's good.
Yeah, it's not a perfect game, obviously. With just having some mechanics being a little weird. When you start off, you're a little too weak for my liking, but that's just me. It does have I forgot who made this game. Who are the people who made this game again?
I don't know.
WB Games.
Put it on the screen right now.
All right.
Oh yeah, right. You're the editor. Anyway, I can just.
Monolith.
It's the second game where they kind of just make things kind of brush things up a little better, and it does fall within the timeline of the Lord of the Rings timeline because it takes place, I think, just before the main adventure starts. Well, a few years before, but yeah.
So as we can see here, Lord of the Rings has had some pretty decent games, really.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think we should move on to at least. I think is there any other games we can go through, or should we go to our final one that we played that
we only really talked about one thing since you asked us. We only really talked about like one other franchise of games since you asked us to go off.
We can keep going.
Keep going. Let's let Saw go. We already talked to me about one for one thing. Let's let Saw have one.
Well, I would look at for me when it comes to licensed games. I had a growing up of a lot of Game Boy Advance licensed games, and let me tell you that there is a difference between Game Boy Advance licensed games and console ones. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. Because what I have noticed is that certain franchises and certain game types that they wouldn't really bother making the production value for like a GameCube, because like that you have to make it 3D, you have to make it more adventurous and whatnot. Game Boy Advance, you can be a lot more lazy about it, and that can show. One example I want to talk about is Garfield: The Search for Pookie.
Oh, boy.
That is a Game Boy Advance game that is just dreadful because here's the thing: you start the game off as Garfield. The whole point of the story is that a couple of mice stole Pookie, his pet, his teddy bear, during the night, and he has to go and find him. First level, you start in John's house, and you have to collect mice. Here's the thing. There's 3 mice in the level, and the only way to get to them is you have to wait for them to leave their holes before you can grab them. You can only grab one mouse at a time and bring it to its cage where you have to drop it off. You have to go throughout the whole level. For one, Garfield walks at a snail's pace, an instance of being faithful to the source material that does not help. He's supposed to be lazy. He's slow. That's fine. For some reason, he jumps faster than he can walk. And for one, the platforming is pretty mediocre because for one, you can actually just walk on the floor the whole time and not really have to go above because all the mice are on the floor. You only need to go around and collect food for extra lives if you want. The problem is this: once you get all 3 mice, Garfield does a victory dance and then he transitions, and you think the level's beaten. No. You get taken to another part of the house where you have to do the exact same thing with another set of 3 mice. After that, you do it another time with 3 more mice. Then the level is beaten. The game has the structure of a level has 3 segments to it. And it makes the game a slog because every single level will be that way. And you have to go through multiple levels and you don't get a save point until the end. And it's not even an actual save point. It's a password system.
Yeah.
And the game just gets more and more obtuse with the design until you get to the farm, which is by far the worst level because it is bottomless pits and slippery surfaces the whole way. And the game suffers for it.
Great.
But then again, it's a case of shovelware, essentially, where they just put a game onto the system that wasn't that good. On the flip side, you actually do have some decent Game Boy Advance licensed games, such as Danny Phantom Urban Jungle, which is essentially just a 2D. It's a 2D rail shooter where you're just Danny on the screen. You move them around, you shoot. You should get like the ability to flip between 4 different gun or else shooting types that can be leveled up depending on the enemies you beat. You have special weapons, like you can use the Fenton Thermos, the gloves, a fishing. You actually do use a fishing pole as one of your things.
Cool.
Which is funny. And so the game is like a solid rail shooter. You have Avatar: The Last Airbender on Game Boy Advance, which is a solid like action adventure kind of game. Not that much. Then you have Nicktoons. Actually, the funny thing is, there's Atlantis Square Pantis on the Game Boy Advance, which I know that the PS2 and
the
other. Yeah, the PS2 console games are infamous for being like very not as good SpongeBob games. The funny thing is that the Atlantis Square Pantis on Game Boy Advance is a pretty solid, okay 2D platformer. I would actually recommend it. I mean, like it's a password system. The levels can be a little long, but actually kind of nice because you get to do a lot more in the game than what the initial episode has. You get like a bunch of mini games, additional characters, and there's even like you play as 2 characters at once, and they have different combo moves depending on who you play as.
Oh, kind of like the Game Boy Advance version of the movie game, right?
Somewhat, yeah. I do find it interesting that the Game Boy Advance you would immediately think has nothing but shovelware, but it has some examples of some very heinous licensed games, but at the same time it has examples of some pretty solid licensed games, which I found to be very surprising when I decided to revisit them from when I played them as a kid. Some of them I'm like, oh my gosh, this game is absolute trash, and others I'm like, this game is actually really good.
I've been looking to try out the DS version of Atlantis Square Pandas for a while now, so now that I know I have a glowing review of it.
Let me know what it is.
Guys, I think we should move on to like one of the last little bits.
All right,
let's go ahead and do it then.
I think we should move on just to something, guys, I know you guys did gush about when you talked to me about it, and that would be the last game, at least this game, Nicktoons Unite.
Oh,
so I can tell you about it.
Hey, Indy, you know how you felt assaulted by the bomb talk about Bikini Bottom? I'm about to have that happen to me now.
Yeah. I'll vouch for you as best I can. I haven't played it yet. I wanted to, but I had to leave early. All right,
you start us off.
I personally don't like this game. Like, I honestly do. It's not really just because it's a bad game per se, but I just think it's boring. Like, I can think it's just 100% boring. And just because the gameplay loop just seems kind of like this like this Left 4 Dead 2 of just you all have different roles and you go through fighting just mooks. And
I never thought of that.
You go through different worlds.
Now I'm really curious. I guess
I never would have likened it to Left 4 Dead, but now I just want to see like Danny hanging from a ledge, like SpongeBob, help me up.
Oh my God, Nicktoons Left 4 Dead. I mean, get on THQ.
But anyway, I'm just using it as an example of just kind of this like this game where you get like 4 roles, but like they pretty much play the exact same way, and just the level design just seems a little boring and uninspired. Like every single character has both a health and a power meter, and the power meter essentially is like it's like for special attacks. Like Danny's going invisible. Timmy and Jimmy and they all have different mechanics, but like it just seemed so boring. Like it's not the level design isn't pretty uninspired. It's a little, but like. I don't know. I just think at least from what I've played, and I've actually when I got we finished and went through, I went through and saw some of the other levels, like just because I knew we were going to talk about this, and
You looked
from
her
what
up?
I can tell, it doesn't really seem to get better, and the levels just seem very boring looking, and you pretty much do the same thing for the most part. So honestly,
But you read the levels afterwards?
I watched like bits and pieces from other things, so that was before I went to bed. Went to bed.
Ah, okay.
So yeah, honestly, I just think this game is very much uninspired, and the only reason you would ever play it is because you get to see SpongeBob and Jimmy Neutron and Timmy Turner and Danny Phantom fighting together, and they all
Most
mention
ambitious
each other.
crossover of all time.
Also, it's just weird of just SpongeBob talking to Jimmy Neutron. It feels, or at least him saying Jimmy or Timmy or
Are you actually
Danny.
putting that down as a gripe?
It just seems a little weird. I don't know.
Wait, you're telling me that a Nicktoons crossover is a
I think
gripe?
it's pretty weird that
No,
Spider-Man talks to Iron Man.
I'm not saying that it's
like he's his
gripe.
buddy.
I'm just saying when they just said their name, say each other's names. I just found it a little weird. It's not a gripe against it. It's my own personal bias.
Whoa, Smash Bros! That's what
Eat your heart
you
out
said.
at me.
Nothing to be. You can't really fix your own personal bias. Honestly, that's.
Well, you heard him.
I just think.
He hates Marvel vs. Capcom because they're all from different franchises.
Yeah. Again, it's still weird to me too. It's weird for me for that too.
Not
use
unusual
that
to have
excuse.
crossover game.
Can't use that argument.
What do you mean we can't use that argument?
No, so you can't use that argument. It's like, oh, so you find those things weird too? It's like, yeah, I do. I very much do.
So Endgame is like a surreal experience for you then.
A little.
Somehow I don't believe that one.
What do you guys think? That I pretty much told me my experience, and now I think I'm hearing an angry mob forming.
you just see the Avengers outside his mouth.
So what do you guys think of this game? Because honestly, I just like shitting on everyone's childhoods.
Yeah, you're
So-
definitely the villain. I have no room to
First of all,
speak because I haven't played it. So.
I'm sorry?
So first of all, I'm going to preface Sonic Adventure, overrated, terrible game, shouldn't have existed.
If you're gonna try to get me angry, it's not gonna work. You
You got a response. There you go. Good.
I'm sorry?
Got a response. Somewhat emotional. Good. Objective complete. Moving out, boys. Goodbye.
Dang it, didn't get a response out of him.
My work here is done.
Yeah. For me, Nicktoons Unite was basically when I was little. That was basically Avengers Endgame to me. Seeing that happen.
You could say that for about Jimmy Timmy Power Hour movies as well.
And I do.
Literally any crossover.
This was essentially that times two because it's 4 characters. So for me, right off the bat, that was a plus immediately. I'm like, yes, finally, after years. And then, all right. So starting off in terms of gameplay, the game is basically like a 3D beat 'em up where you're not really locked from going side to side. You can just kind of stroll along without being blocked by like an invisible wall, unlike the first 3D games. With this one, each character has their standard attack and a jump and a shield. Bomb mentioned the power meter. The shield can be activated at any time, and it goes down whenever the shield takes damage. Every character has their own special sets of abilities that are unlocked as you progress through the game through special terminals that are designed for each character depending on what they need at that time. And so you go through each world for each character with the exception, I mean, technically Jimmy, but Jimmy only gets 1 level technically, and the level's technically you being shrunk down inside Goddard, so I don't really know if I could say Jimmy really has his own world, but yeah, he doesn't really get one, unfortunately, despite being the one that like brings everyone together. He is the Nick Fury of the game.
Well, yeah, I think it's like the first game you actually have to play as him, but then as you go, he just stops becoming playable.
I don't think he was playable in Volcano Island. I don't know. Yeah, so Nicktoons Unite in terms of gameplay, definitely the kind of game that you have to go in expecting it to not really live up to your expectations because there really aren't a whole lot. It's definitely a case of banking on you knowing these characters, and that's kind of what's going to keep you around for it. Because combat's pretty straightforward. You don't really have complexity in terms of combat. You have your standard mooks that vary in color that depends on that changes their toughness. You have different, only a couple different variations. Some require you use special abilities to beat them, but for the most part, not that complex. There really aren't puzzles per se. I mean, like, there's like a couple, but they're pretty straightforward, not really all that complex. The game is definitely made so that little kids can get through it without any problems. I mean, Frank, even as a little kid, I almost never lost a life, and game overing is something that I don't even think is possible because it just doesn't happen. So if you're looking for a challenge, definitely not. Don't do Nick Nucci. You're not going to get a challenge. The game does have a couple glitches, nothing really game breaking, but they're more like annoying inconveniences at most. Nothing's going to stop you from progressing, but you will notice them. So overall, I do admit the game itself is really not too good. It's more put down as a mediocre experience. Mediocre. But I would definitely say that what it does not accomplish as an actual game, it accomplishes in terms of representation, because the characters do interact quite well with each other. I would have liked if there was like dialogue between characters during the gameplay. I think that would have added a lot. But
I think that might be a blessing in disguise, because I don't want to hear the same. Because let's be honest, if it was a game like this, they would only have 2 lines and they say it repeatedly. So I think it would be a good idea not to do that.
I mean, like the characters speak to each other and getting like not like a catchphrase, but like depending on levels and circumstances, having like each character talk more with each other as opposed to like just saying a one-liner like they do with some of their special moves.
I think that they wouldn't even do that.
I think that the characters actually do well in cutscenes because they actually stay in character, unlike some other licensed games that have them act out. Some of them can be a little more stilted, but for the most part, I'd say the characters interact the way that you would expect, like Jimmy to talk to SpongeBob, in a sense that SpongeBob has no idea what's going on, so Jimmy intentionally doesn't say anything. Danny is kind of like the more level-headed one of the whole group. He kind of keeps everyone on track. He doesn't try to stay emotional throughout the whole journey, just because Jimmy's a bit of he's a bit of his selfish self. Jimmy is his smart aleck self. SpongeBob is kind of naive, so Danny just kind of stays there as like the level-headed one of the group, which can be pretty nice. I will say, if there's one issue with the banter, the whole point of the game is that it implies that Jimmy Timmy Power Hour already happened, and possibly the second one, which is why Timmy and Jimmy don't really debate each other when it comes to like fairies and magic. There's not a whole lot of banter between them, which I think would have been a lot more entertaining if you had like Jimmy and Timmy getting on each other's nerves, SpongeBob like just like messing with stuff and making Jimmy super mad. So I do think that it could have benefited from more like characterization. As an overall product, I think that it's a okay game with some good representation of the franchises.
With games like this, anytime somebody ever tells me that it's a game for kids, and it's like it shouldn't be that good, I don't ever think that's an excuse in that sort of way. Because if
I'm not really saying
I'm going back to this.
Why it is. I'm saying that if you're going to go in with a certain expectation, it's good to go with the expectation that this game is meant to be like super easy for kids, as opposed to saying there's a difference between saying it's a kids game, so don't expect much, and saying this is a kids game with the intention of being really easy, so don't go in with the expectation that it's going to be challenging.
Well, no, I don't care if it's easy or hard. That's not the thing. The thing is, if you make the game interesting, make something that is worthwhile. Because if you can have a game like Battle for Bikini Bottom that can be very interesting, have amazing sort of gameplay. I know they're from 2 different genres, and it's really stupid to compare them, but I like to think that if you have a game like that, you can at least try to make things a little bit more just have something interesting. I don't care if a game is piss easy or hard as balls, except for Dark Souls, but we don't want to get into that. But if the game isn't interesting at all, then you failed as a game. If your game it is one thing for a game to be fun, and there's one thing for a game to suck. But if a game is boring, that I think is the worst part for a game to be.
I can agree with that.
I can see on that with some games definitely being a case of if it's not, it's kind of the same thing with movies. If it's not piquing your interest enough, it's almost worse than watching something bad, because at least something bad has something redeeming to it.
Yeah.
I can see what you mean by that with Nicktoons Unite. I would say not defending whether or not it's of interest. I'm just saying that to go into the expectation of that. I'm not trying to like defend on difficulty. I'm just saying
I don't care about difficulty. You know that.
I know that's what I'm saying. That's not the part I'm trying to like discuss.
Okay. I don't know. I just have a certain expectation for certain games. I want any game that anyone would play to be good automatically, but that can't be the case because of just there are certain types of things. A lot of people put their hard work into these games, regardless of how good or bad it is. That's why you have a bunch of gems in licensed games, because people, if you do a lot of hard work and you are able to essentially make an engaging sort of thing, it is something that will be remembered forever, and maybe get like a remake down the line, or just something that people will talk about. Like I know for people will talk about stuff like Battle for Bikini Bottom, because that's something that is a very memorable, very well played game that just has a bunch of cool mechanics, and people remember it because Rehydrate is there, because the speedrunning community kind of put that up. But then when you have a game like Nicktoons Unite, which is something that's very forgettable, very boring, it was something of the time, which didn't exactly help its case, but I'm not going to fault it for that. You have a game that will just go into obscurity and just will not really be remembered as time goes on. Think of it like this. Once we, I know we are probably like the last generation that remembers these kind of stuff. But once, go down 20 years down the line, no one's going to remember that. But I can tell you for a fact, people are going to remember Battle for Bikini Bottom or Mario 64 or stuff like that. I know I compared Mario 64 again, but shush. But the point I'm trying to get here is, it is one thing to make a game specifically on the nostalgia, or making it on like a popular characters at the time. And there's one thing to do, just put them all in and get some things and put some mooks in, and there you go, that's the game. But there's another thing to handcraft and just know what you're doing. I know, and just make an amazing game for people to remember. And that's kind of just more or less my point. I don't know. Sorry, I love games so much. I love games so much that I love to kind of,
you love games so much that you hate them.
Give them a higher standard, and that's why I just...
Are you saying you have a higher standard for games than we do?
I don't know. Do you guys? I know. I didn't say that. I just said I give games a high standard. I love to give games a high standard regardless of what it is. And I know it's a bit of a fault of mine, but it's because I love this
Kick back, relax, and aim low. You'll never be disappointed.
What?
I said kick back, relax, and aim low. You'll never be disappointed.
I don't like to aim low with games. Mainly just because I'd rather...
Aim low and hit below the belt.
Yeah.
I
know you guys are making fun of me about this, but I honestly, I'm being serious about just... I think games are probably one of the best... Oh, goddamn, let me finish. Let me fucking talk. I'm being serious right now.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm trying to pour out my guts here. Yeah, I think games are one of the best...
Going out your gut. Why don't you go ahead and pull out your gut?
I hate you both.
No, go on, please. Finish.
I think games are some of the best mediums to go through, tell stories, and just tell a story that you want to tell because of the interactivity. You remember things you can remember things because you did them. You were the one who just interacted through a certain character avatar. Some of them have personalities that you can relate to, others that you want to hate and punch in the face, and others that you just don't want to ever forget. And games can help people through many different trials, tribulations through life, and it can be relaxing. And any game that people play should be an amazing game that can take you through in a different experience. And any game that tries to just get a cash grab, and that is, I believe, to be a bit of an insult to just the intelligence of people who don't really know about games, but people who do know about games. Because just, why would you want to buy this besides of maybe wanting to laugh at it? Why would you want to buy a boring game? Why do you want to buy a game that just doesn't have that? It can turn people away from playing video games if that's one of their first games for the first time. Or it can essentially swear people off video games altogether. Because while some of us have money to get a lot of games all the time, some of them don't. And if you're a kid and you have to go through and have to choose one game or two games to play for like maybe a year or so, you better hope that it's a good game to play. And if it isn't, it might swear them off of playing, getting rid of this like amazing piece of technology. But
Totally.
because of that, I like to think that it's one thing to be a really good game and one thing to be a really bad game. But if it's a boring game, it's one of the worst things I think that can be done. And thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
No, I see what you mean in that, and I can definitely attest to what you mean about the game being boring. And yes, I do understand that you see it as there being a certain standard for games to be at a level because some people can only afford to get a game every so often. I also think it's also important to see a game into how it can give meaning to a person, because there's a reason that everyone has a different favorite game of all time list. There's a reason why people make these lists, and there's different like and dislike ratios to when there's a countdown or a review. And some people say Ocarina of Time to this day is still their favorite. Some people might say Persona 5 or Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy is their favorite game of all time, is because for every person, every game has a different meaning. Regardless of those feeling, or regardless of the actual game's quality, what that game does for someone can mean something else. Such as for Indy, SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom is his favorite game of all time, his favorite SpongeBob game. And a lot of people will attest that it's a great platform, but for other people, it doesn't have that same meaning because they maybe don't see the layout or the design, or they just don't like SpongeBob, and that's why, and that's a fair point. And then for others, they like Final Fantasy because they love the RPGs, they love the storylines, they love how the characters interact and how they get treated in this series. And for other people, it's boring. It's the same way with Metal Gear Solid. People love the cutscenes, they love the gameplay and how it interacts in this very serious tone, whereas other people, that sort of thing, they want lighthearted, they want something simple and easy to process. That's where it comes down to games having different meanings for everyone, which is why for some people it leads to very intense, passionate debates for people about when you have, especially when you get more higher up games, people will well, I think me and DeBomb are handling this a lot more maturely than a lot of YouTube comment sections would handle the situation.
Comment sound, though. That's the difference.
I mean, yeah, but
man,
yeah,
and
it comes down to the reason why licensed games are so big a topic is because a lot of people, they may have absolutely no care in licensed games in general, and they don't pull their punches, and because of that, they may not see a lot more licensed games as bad products, because a lot of licensed games can get away with not being as good because of the franchise they're from, and for some, that's inexcusable, and they have very good reasons to say that because they're still games. But for the people that are fans of those franchises, it doesn't really matter. For them, just being able to interact with the medium that they enjoy, regardless of if it's AAA quality, that sort of experience is enough to like stay with them forever, really, just because they're able to finally interact with a medium, a franchise that they have grown to love in other mediums, in one that actually allows them to be interactive. I think that's why, like, I mean, you make good points with Nicktoons Unite. I'm not going to say that you're wrong, and I acknowledge that a lot of things in that game are boring or misplaced, but for me, it'll always be that the kind of game where I can still pick it up, acknowledge that it's not that good, and love it all the same, because that's really how you know you love a product. Because if you can acknowledge and see what's wrong with it, what's good with it, and accept that, and still feel the same affection, I think that's an indicator that you actually love and enjoy what it is the game that you're playing or the movie or whatever it is. So you make good points. I respect that, but I'm still gonna like Nicktoons Unite just as much.
Yeah, I'm not saying you can't. Trust me, you can like any game you want. Just
Damn it, the bomb! You're supposed to just say thank you, buddy, man. You just made the whole emotional speech have a nice climactic cliffhanger, man.
You're not supposed to perpetuate the argument.
You like whatever game you want. Just pick out a game that you think would be super fun, and if you like a game, it doesn't matter if it's a licensed game or any other game. As long as it's something you love, then no one can take that away from you. And I think that's where we can end things off, honestly.
Yeah, and they all lived happily ever after. The end.
Thank you. I think we can cut the episode off around here. Unless you have anything else to say, anyone?
Yeah,
I feel like we could do another one of these. There's still like a bunch of ground to cover with this game. Honestly, I'd be down to return for another one of these types of episodes.
Yeah, we can probably. I feel like this would be a good place to stop, but we can probably do another like licensed games episode or anything like that.
We can do it for the big guys,
possibly.
Yeah,
we'll definitely do more like more focused licensed games for sure. But I definitely like to revisit like the more general licensed games, good and bad.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that'd be a very good thing to do, kind of recur. So anyway, guys, thank you for guys. I'd like to just say thank you guys for joining me on this podcast and dealing with me.
No problem, bro. Anytime. I'm gonna have to deal with you twice because I'm editing this.
Oh, you're gonna have a fun time.
Oh yeah.
All right, then.
You can find essentially Indie Bob and Saw's channels in the link in the description. You be sure to check them out. I know Indie Bob's got a bunch of playthroughs, and he's probably got a new playthrough in the works right now. At least kind of planning sort of stages.
Don't
I'm not sure. We're not sure, and I'm pretty sure he will not tell us.
Don't spend information you don't have access to, especially since it's not true at the moment. Unfortunately, I wish it was.
Oh, you do? All right. Anyway, check out their channel. Because there's a bunch of stuff in the archive. There's probably some that me and Saw are in.
And you guys have been in stuff. You guys have been in I might as well plug it, I guess.
Yeah, I'm doing a plug. I was about to say, like, if you guys want to plug anything, go ahead.
So obviously I have like the SpongeBob playthroughs. I'd say that's the one I'm most known for. But if you want to see more stuff with like us three or even us two, there's like Lego Star Wars Complete Saga. There's Mario Party 2, Mario Party 3. Mario Party 1 would have been one of them this year, but unfortunately, no. That didn't age. It's January 31st, and it's been a year since I announced that. The Shovel Knight, that's a good one. Check those out. They're pretty cool. I like them.
I'll leave a few of the things in the description to kind of get you guys started. Saul, do you want to plug anything at all?
Nope, I got nothing.
You should have said that.
All
right. Well, I guess we'll tune in next time for another episode. Could be pretty much about any video game or any franchise like that. If you want any specific ones, you can leave anything in the description. We can get into it. Well, I guess going through. This is the Bomb 27 signing off.